Hey, just so you know, in this video, Kyle gets pretty in-depth about 360-degree filmmaking and the future of the technology. He talks a lot, like a lot. If that is not your jam, you are just not cool and hip with it. You know you want to be cool and hip, so stay tuned.
Okay, so for my first project for the media practices class that I have at school, I decided to make a little 360 project, but the way that we are doing the projects at school is it's open topic, so we get to choose, and essentially like they're 2-week turnaround time, so it's pretty quick. So the projects aren't huge. A big thing that I sort of took away from the way we discussed approaching the projects, instead of making this huge project or trying to make something bigger than we can accomplish, have it be more of a study of a certain technique or area of practice that we're not too familiar with. And I've dabbled in 360 before, but I haven't worked with it too much. And I wanted to get more into it, especially with Adobe's latest 2018 update to the Creative Cloud. I've used the Samsung Gear 360 for filming my video that my 360 film that I did almost a year ago now. It was like last April. Since then, in the labs, we've gotten the Insta360 Pro, but that's a really big machine. It's like size of my head kind of thing. It also shoots 8K, and we have one computer that can edit that right now in the lab, and it's also having technical difficulty, so using that to record wasn't really working out. The Gear 360 that I was planning on using was being used by somebody else, so I didn't really have access to it for the time frame that I needed to shoot. What was I gonna do? Use a 360 camera mod for my phone, because I have the Essential phone, and one of the great things about this, if you see like the 2 dots there, those are sort of magnetic prong holes where you can attach different accessories. And right now, Essential, the company, they don't have a bunch of accessories to put on. They're planning to put out more, but the first one that they've released to the public is a 360 camera mod, which I don't have here. We have it in the lab, so let's go there. Okay, so now we are in the mixed reality lab at school, and it is the 360 camera mod attachment for the Essential phone, which I was using that I was just talking about. So this is my phone, those prongs like I was talking about before. You just attach the camera to it and boom, you're ready to go. This box is pretty small as it is, like my hand can basically cover it up. Take that off and look at it, it's so tiny. Probably the tiniest 360 camera I've seen yet. And the quality, for what it's worth, isn't amazing, but if you want to get pretty decent 360 photos, it does that. It stitches everything together. 360 video, it does that as well. It just attaches via magnets. So, boom, it's connected, ready to go. Sean, that's his desk, but yeah. I don't know if he's gonna be around
today.
So just by attaching it, if you have the camera app open, what happens is it then just converts itself to the 360 mode. You hear the camera turn on. It does have a bit of a fan on the inside. When it starts going, you can record video or take the photos. And what's awesome is you can also live stream it if you wanted to. What's really nice is the software stitches everything together, so you don't have to worry about doing that in post, which for the Gear 360, I ended up stitching all that myself in After Effects. Being on Android, shooting on Android, it automatically uploads to Google Photos. And with that, I can immediately download any of the videos or photos that I take automatically. I can actually view the videos and photos in 360 in real time right on the browser without having to do anything. So it has native support, which is something else that I want to get into as well. Just like the support for 360 and VR content now at the beginning of 2018 versus even just like a year ago when I was first getting into 360. But before I get into that, I want to get more into the visual effects that I was applying to the footage itself. So what I did for this video was I imported it directly into Adobe Premiere because, like I was saying previously, I had to edit and stitch everything together in After Effects before having a usable file format. Recording on the Gear 360, you just basically have these 2 spheres in a 2:1 aspect ratio, and then you'd have to have separate compositions for each file and then have another composition to then stitch it all together and adjust everything. Recording on the Essential phone, it did the stitching automatically, so I already had the equirectangular footage, so it was basically like VR ready. I was able to just pop it right into Premiere, and with the latest updates, it runs smoothly, and you can actually add a button to your playback, which allows you to view it in the 360 sphere so that you can scroll through it as it's playing back in real time, which is really neat. So that way you get to see the effects as it's happening and edit it natively. The VR ready effects allow for the effects to be applied to the sphere that's created as a single piece, because the regular effects that you can apply on a 2D layer, you can still apply them into a 3D sphere, but it applies it to the equirectangular image. So it applies it to the flat image that then gets warped into the sphere. So you'll always find that there's a line that's basically, it looks like a splice where you have the effects, because that's where it gets wrapped around and that's where they meet. That ends up giving you like this weird line no matter what effect you do. Even with the Gaussian blur or some simple effect like that, you are going to have that line. It's not a stitch line, and to remove that is extra work. In terms of having a shorter turnaround time, that's just not something I wanted to play with. I was focusing more on effects that were VR ready, but the pixelation that I had used as the first layer was a regular effect. So even in my footage, it's harder to notice because of all the negative space and just the amount of moving lines and everything that's in it. But there is that splice line. The chromatic shift that I have on is a VR ready effect. So that is applied universally, although I found a weird side effect where if you're facing front of the footage, you get the biggest distortion between the channel separations, but if you turn around all the way behind, it's gone. So even though it says it applies in a spherical manner and covers everything without having that stitch line, it disappears as you get to the back of that sphere. That's fairly confusing and something that I want to play with more, but definitely good to know. And then also like the finding edges tool, that was basic, that was a standard or traditional effect, so that also helped add to that line that appears in the 360 footage. Applying everything together gave it this really weird negative space that made it feel like this in-between world, almost as if you were diving into the computer. Basically just me walking from this lab out in the hallway, down, outside, and back in. You can see some basic shapes that this area with familiarity to those who know it, but if you don't, it's not going to be as noticeable. Another thing to consider is just how much you are taking out of the space with these effects added on, which is why I then went with the ambient soundtrack, because I wanted it to be like you're floating in this ethereal space that is neither reality or completely fiction. It's a little bit of both. For the sake of viewing it in a class setting for presentation, I'm going to be putting it up on a full screen and then dragging the video around so you can see everything, so I can show everybody at the same time. Because the biggest issue with 360 and trying to get multiple people viewed at once is synchronization. That's really hard to accomplish, because if you have everybody watching on their headsets and it's published on YouTube, then they can get started playing, but not everyone's going to view it at the same time. So that part is definitely quite difficult. If it's something like a VR theater where everything is integrated, it's a bit easier, but that is just way beyond anything that we have here right now. So yeah, that's out of the question. Coming back to these short turnaround times for the projects, I definitely took away that you use these projects as more of periods of study, where you're focusing on a certain technique or medium that you haven't really exercised before. And with the new integration of these VR and 360 tools into the Adobe software, that's something I haven't really played with, because before I was using a Skybox plugin from the company called Metal in After Effects to stitch my footage together. And what happened was Adobe acquired Metal and then took their software and baked it right into After Effects and Premiere. So having that really streamlines everything. Having an integrated experience like that is quite smooth. I haven't tried stitching footage yet because, like I was saying, shooting right on my phone, it's stitched in here. It's not the cleanest stitch, but with it being done automatically, it makes jumping into the post-production stage of actually editing the footage a lot faster. Just for the projects, there are two more like that are coming up. Being able to break it down to an idea of studying a certain area and just experimenting with it makes it a lot easier for me to approach these projects instead of having some finished or polished piece of work. It's an area of exploration. So within the 2 weeks, we have to produce something that we would consider a finished piece. But if it's something new that we're trying out, obviously it's not going to be perfect. So being able to take something that's smaller and digestible within that period of time is hugely important. And that also brings up just the integration of like 360 and VR tools into software, on top of Adobe integrating those tools into the programs. It's also largely integrated into more basic applications, just like the file viewer. Because I use Windows. Even the movie file viewer allows for viewing 360 natively, where before I'd have to download VLC Media Player and then watch the equirectangular version, and then have to transcode those pieces of footage with certain blocks of text in different areas that you have to manually input to then give it the proper coding to be recognized on an online format to be read as a 360 film. Now, even those basic applications are playing full 360 content that you can drag around natively. This is my experience compared to like a year ago. So even early 2017, different products weren't as far along as one might think with 360. So now 2018, it's basically baked into all the software that we have access to. Moving forward, that's just going to give people more reason and easier reason to access 360 and VR content. That's going to be basically it for now. That's this project done, and on to project number 2.
Hey, did you think I was gone? Not a chance. I just wanted to say, if you stuck around this long, you're a nerd. A very hip and cool nerd.